Governor Hope Uzodinma has been re-elected as the governor of Imo State as Odudu have taken over Kogi State, and as we await that of Bayelsa State, quite a lot of mixed reaction coming from the people of Bayelsa. So we'll beg your indulgence to stay calm as the INEC do their work, getting all the collation results and see what will come out of Bayelsa State. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies, where we keep you updated with all the juicy stories from the Nigerian newspaper. I am Stella Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program together with Rachel Tansy. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Sarah.
How was the weekend?
It was fine. How was yours?
Mine was terrific. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
All right, we're live on Facebook and in YouTube. You can do well to join us live there. Drop your comment or your feedback on any of the story that you think is of interest to you this morning. And we will go straight into the paper, starting with the Guardian newspaper. And the first story on the Guardian newspaper, starting with the big story here, we have Uzodinma re-elected, Odudu wins Kogi as Dire leads in Bayelsa State. And we are seeing that the Guardian took its time to actually give us some of the figures from Imo and also that of Kogi State. And we're seeing that Governor Hope Uzodinma in Imo State is leading by 540,308 votes. And then the PDP is having about 71,503, and the Labour Party is having 64,081. And we're seeing in Kogi State with a very big gap, where we're seeing that the APC led by 446,237 votes, and then the SDP is having 259 votes and 52, and then the PDP we are having 46,362. You can take a closer look at some of the results of the 6 local government councils out of 8, which is that of Bayelsa State. We're seeing that the PDP is leading there in Bayelsa State with about 138,000 votes and 9. And then the APC is having about 74,255 votes. So you can continue to keep your fingers crossed, especially for that of Bayelsa. Let us see how the votes will end up. Still on the Guardian newspaper, reps to launch National Assembly eyes for effective oversight of the MDAs. Still on the Guardian newspaper, Falana knocks Israel over collective punishment crime against humanity. And talking about the Imo Guba polls, we're having a politics page on the Guardian that say how not to conduct a credible election. So you can do well to read that story on page 27. And coming from the President Tinubu, the challenge of moral leadership is an editorial which you can find inside the paper. And on the issue of fuel subsidy, forex liberalization may drive inflation to 30% by December. And then we are waiting tomorrow, because that is when we'll be having the inflation rate for October. We remember for that of September, we're having about 26 point something percent inflation. So we'll keep our fingers crossed as we await that coming from the NBC tomorrow for October. 45-year-old woman flees with daughters over circumcision rights. You can find more of that story inside the paper. And outside, we're having a question here that says social media regulation bill gagging free speech or taming mustard. Now this is a question, and it's left for the viewers to actually drop your comment. When you read that story on page 4, let us know whether it's actually invading on freedom of speech or actually taming foster. We are aware of all the hate speeches that do travel on social media. So you can do well to drop your comment on that story as well. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On First News newspaper, Silver's camp suffers major setback as INEC cancels 24,000 voodoo votes. The big story on the paper, Guba polls Uzodinma Ododo win as Diri maintains lead in Bayelsa. The writer under the story, INEC adjourns Bayelsa collation to today. Massive protest rocks INEC office over doctored results. Party supporter killed by Bayelsa collation. I take that right again. It says party supporter killed at Bayelsa collation center. Off-cycle polls, INEC upholds 9,925 election result. Dino Melaye demands cancellation of Kogi Guba poll. Still on Kogi Guba, INEC to hold fresh election in 59 polling units. Nigerian lawmakers must ridiculed, says Akpabio. Kogi election rigged, but I won't waste my time in court. SDP candidate. CNS movement church Babaladuro Obidaye transits to glory. 5 die, 1 injured as car rams into truck in Ogun State. Nigerian lawmakers most ridicule, a statement coming from the Senate President, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Independent and see what the stories look like. Re-elected Governor Uzodinma says he has been vindicated, with the writer says no candidate have won 27 local government in the history of Imo polls. And then Labour Party reject the result, heads to court. Of course, with all that happened during the weekend, you definitely see that coming, that a lot of parties will be going to the court, because especially, we'll begin to see parties beginning to see how is that possible that a candidate actually captured the whole of 27 local government. And we know that Imo was one of those states that a lot of tension was there. We saw reports coming out that there were some forged results that actually came out even before the election started, and then quite a number of things. And I remember you and I kept preaching. We became like preachers for the politics, and then talking about election and the need for people to stay away from trouble. But I mean, with all we said, it still happened eventually. Well, we're waiting to see how this whole case will be, but we're looking forward to a time where we'll have an election in Nigeria without actually heading to court eventually. Still on Daily Independent newspaper, we have on annual confirm Amuka Osoba Abigbena lists 300 editors to Oyo, Tinubu to declare conference open, Governor Eno as guest of honor. You can find more of the detail of that story inside the paper. And the big story here says Naira suffers pushback amid fresh CBN rescue attempts, with the writer saying no economic manipulation will make Naira rise. This is coming from some analysts. Say Nigeria must first fix fundamental issues to get the result. So you can do well to start reading the story on the front page and continue inside the paper. And on the issue of the Guba polls that took place during the weekend, Bayelsa, Kogi, Imo, Guba polls, Serap asks INEC to identify and arrest sponsors of electoral offenses. You can find detail of that story on page 7. NNPC restores production of 275,000 barrels per day, said to Bangasser Total Energies Rift. You can find detail on page 6. Federal government has achieved a lot in fight against oil theft. This is coming from the defense minister. Oba of Benin urges Cardoso to fight corruption in CBN. You can find more in the paper. Jam to Senate probe us on alleged admission racketeering. You can find detail on page 6. And we still have on the issue of the off-cycle election. Odudu wins in Kogi. Dire Coster to victory in Bayelsa, saying the PDP SDP call for cancellation of Kogi election, with detail found inside the paper. And here we're having another story down that says man who sells illicit drugs in wheelchair, ex-convict and others arrested in NDLEA raids. Detail found on page 8. We have a picture story here where we are already say congratulated to the governor of Imo State already for his re-election. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of stories of interest to you.
On Voice of Liberty, Imo election, INEC announces APC's Uzodinma as winner. CAC threatens mass delisting of BDC operators, non-compliant firms and others on December 1st. Off-season election, EFCC seized 11 million naira cash and 14 arrested. And on insecurity, entire North would have been on fire without my action. A statement coming from Matawali. The Minister of State for Defense, Bello Matawali, says without his action as the #1 citizen of Zamfara State in the Northwest Zone, the entire northern region would have been on fire. Abuja Airport suspend flight operations as aircraft overshoots runway. Gani Adams writes Tinubu makes case for restructuring. Singer breaks fella's record, marries 30 women in a single day. And at the downside of the paper, Dr. Bugaji lashes at El Rufai over Penteca Market and others demolition. You can find more details inside the paper, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
And on Daily Times newspaper, NNPCL, other revenue generating agency, remit 14.38 trillion naira. You can find detail of the story on the front page and continue inside the paper. As the carriage continues, I can end herdsmen killing, kidnapping in months. This is coming from Fulani herdsmen. I can end herdsmen killing and kidnappings in months. This is coming from the Fulani herdsmen, with the rider saying, "They are my people. I have all their secret at my fingertips," he said. Federal government will be involved, a Daily Time exclusive, and I think this is a story that is quite interesting for the government to sweep into action, get these herdsmen that say they actually have all the secret and they should be interrogated to give all that they know about this issue of killing that has been happening for years between the herdsmen and also the farmers. Other stories we have on the paper is talking about calls for restructuring research, Ghana Adam pressures Tinubu, Nigeria going nowhere without restructuring, coming from Akitola the Sun, and Delta-based human rights lawyer doubts president can do it. And then we are having Atiku Obi had made case for structure that carries all Nigerians along. You can do well to start reading that story on the front page and continue inside the paper. Labour Party PDP kick as INEC declares Ozodinma winner of the Guba polls, with detail found on page 5. Dire leading in Bayelsa heat chase in Kogi State. You can find detail of that story. And coming from Oshomole, he said, "Obaseki, my friend, despite political differences." You can find detail of what that means inside the paper. I was bus conductor, wheelbarrow pusher, and laborer. This is coming from Ikman chairman. You can find why he have to say that on page 21. We have a picture story here where we can see some of the INEC officials. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Nation newspaper, Naira to rebound with $34.8 billion diaspora remittances. Customs raises exchange rate for importers, rate up by 12.29 Naira to a dollar. Nigerian equities return rises to 10.7 trillion Naira. We have 156 billion Naira dispute. UBA takes over stallion assets. The big story on the paper, Imo Kogi governorship polls Uzodinma Ododo triumph. INEC keeps Bayelsa's leading candidate Diri in suspend, and we have Ochuno Ajaka Malai rejects election outcome. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. We have numbers where we can see the results in Kogi, Imo, and then in Bayelsa, the local government where APC is leading, where Labour Party, where PDP is leading, and all of that details. You can find more on page 4. Inflation rises on soaring food and energy prices. Terrorists kill 100 in Burkina Faso attack. We have Way Bokai Sikh alliance ahead of runoff. Heavy fighting rages near main Gaza hospital. You can find details on page 28. At the downside of the paper, we have 5 die in Ijebu Odeore road crash. Oyo seals illegal mining sites. You can find details on page 25. We have other stories saying Abdul Razak mourns veteran Kannywood actor Samanja. You can find more details on page 28, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Right, a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. We have panic grips CBN staff over a planned reorganization, with detail found on page 25. And on the governorship election, which seems to be leading in most of the papers, APC win Imo Kogi, Dire Silva knows his fate today. With the rider, Uzodinma wins all the 27 local governments, scores 540 votes, 308 votes. PDP Labour Party reject the result. PDP leads in Bayelsa, and then INEC to hold fresh election in 59 Kogi polling units Saturday. You can do well to find more detail of that story inside the paper. JAM launched Senate probe of admission racketeering, detail found on page 29. Also, we have identify and arrest sponsors of electoral offenses in Bayelsa, Kogi, Imo. Serap tells INEC. You can find more detail of that story on page 27. And we have NFA bombard terrorist stronghold in Borno, kill scores and destroy gun, trucks, and others. Detail found on page 5. We have to really applaud our efforts for doing a great job there. Appeal Court affirmation of Kalu's election good for Senate country. You can find detail of that inside the paper. This is a report coming from the APC chairman. And we have the NGE conference, Tinubu Amuka, 300 editors to storm Oyo. Governor Eno is guest of honor. And outside of the paper, we have cultists killed 5 in Rivers. Give condition for ceasefire. You can do well to find page 5, the story on page 5. And this is one of the things that the former governor Wike was trying hard to fight while in Rivers State. We hope that he gives the support to the present governor Bufara to be able to fight these cultists there. You can find detail of all the stories inside the paper, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Edo South changes political calculation, dwells on numerical strength. New Supreme Court justices emerged this week. FJSC to nominate to NGC. You can find more details on page 2. Investors must establish factories in Nigeria to produce what they mine. Statement coming from Alake. You can find details on page 12. Rule-based market will drive foreign investors in stock market. A statement coming from Anasanya. You can find details on page 19. It is immoral of government to ask us to pay for vacant billboards, coming from Ima of Jufor. You can find details on page 21. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, APC in sweeping victory in Kogi and Imo, Bayelsa to be decided today. Labour Party ADC rejects Imo result. Labour Party agent manhandled bundle out of collation center in Imo. INEC officials held hostage in Bayelsa. Identify and arrest sponsors of electoral offenses, Serap tells Yakubu. You can find details on page 26 and 27. Still on the papers, annual confab Omuka Osoba Obiabena lead 300 editors to Uyo State. You can find more details on page 2. Bauchi Emirates sacks 6 traditional title holders for improper turbaning. You can find more details on page 28. 13% derivation. CUPP cautions Niger governor over threat to shut down hydro dams. You can find details on page 4. NNPC settles Pengassan Total Energies lingering rift. Restores 275,000 barrels of oil per day production. 40% revenue deduction. Varieties have no IGR, ASU tells federal government. You can find more details on page 29, and that's all news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Vanguard newspaper, Custom raises forex rates for collection of duties from 717 naira per dollar to 783 naira per dollar. You can find detail of that on page 8. Edo to become the first world economy, Obaseki, Dangote, and others, because they are looking into making a refinery over there. You can do well to read more detail of that story on page 11. Still on insecurity now business, this is coming from Matawale, the former governor of Zamfara State. Also, we have alert admission racketeering. We are ready for Senate probe. This is coming from JAM. NNPCL restores production of 275,000 barrel per day. You can find each of the story inside the paper. Off-cycle governorship election. Ozodima Odudu wins in Imo and Kogi by Yelsa ready today, with quite a number of riders following that story, which I'll take just a few. Here we have Bayelsa coalition continues today. Also, and then we are also having polls didn't hold in some Imo polling unit. This is coming from Yanga Africa. This is one of the body that is always interested in making sure there's transparency when it comes to election. And they are here, they are saying that polls didn't hold in some Imo polling unit. We hope that INEC have a valid reason why that didn't happen. And then also we're seeing that a female NYC member missing with beavers and result sheet. And then also Dima re-election, well deserved. This is coming from Sanwo-Lu. And then also we have another writer under that story that is saying we have learned nothing. This is coming from the Catholic bishops. And then we have protests in Bayelsa over Nima and Basibe result, talking about some of the local governments over there in Bayelsa State. And it's quite worrisome, you know. And I really agree with the Catholic bishop saying we have learned nothing, despite people coming out to say, let this election be transparent. This is the time where INEC have to come out and actually prove to Nigeria that they are a commission that stands for integrity, accountability. But yet we are still seeing that there were pockets of attack. There was vote buying during the election. Here we are seeing that even an NYC member is missing with some collation results and also some beavers. So that is to tell you that somebody somewhere was bent on making sure that this election must favor his party. So I really do not know how it is. Already results are out for Iman Kogi State, even though we're seeing some parties are rejecting the result. But what are the lessons we have to learn? Because believe you me, Rachel, we're having another off-season election in Edo State next year. So if we're able to fix some of the issues we are having, February election, we had pockets of intimidation of voters. Coming to the governorship election, this is the first time in the history of Nigeria that we're saying that a governorship election is now becoming a do-or-die affair. In fact, the unrest during the governorship was more than that of even the presidential and also the National House of Assembly. So this really calls for us to sit back and see, where are we getting it wrong? Is it that as followers, we do not really know who we want as leaders, or what is the problem, or are we electing leaders that really do not know what it means to lead their people? So I think this is the question. We are having religious bodies coming out to say that we have not learned our lesson. That is to say that yes, as a country, we're yet to learn our lesson. And until we learn that lesson, we'll keep being in the same spot over and over, repeating the same mistakes until we learn from it. So here we are seeing that even Serap is telling the president to look into the issue of vote buying. But believe you me, here we are seeing even talking about electoral offenses. And I remember last year where the INEC chairman said the fact that they do not have the body to actually arrest election offenders. They have to hand over to the police. And you remember, Rich, I keep saying, if the work is so cumbersome for INEC, I think it's high time they write a petition, submit it over to the House, let them look into it, the fact that this work is too much for us as a body. We need additional hands. If the body needs to be splitted, then it should be splitted. As far as we'll have the work done, I think Nigerians would not mind us spending money there, rather than not spending money and yet we will not have the work being done by INEC. Because from all of the things that are coming out from the paper, here we're seeing that the governor of Imo State is rejoicing. But I'd love to hear what the people of Imo State have to say about the outcome of this election. Was this truly who they wanted? Was this truly what they wanted? Or is this just somebody imposing things like this? So we are hoping to see more results, more feedback coming from the people of Imo State, Kogi State, and as we await that of Bayelsa State today as well.
Something called division of labor, and anytime you say perhaps if the work is too much for INEC, let them be out there and say this is too much for us and all of that. I don't believe that the work is too much for INEC in a lot of ways, because they are in the position for division of labor, for example. And I believe that INEC is also in the position where they can't tell the federal government the work is too much for them, because it means they can't demand as much as they demand when it comes to their budget. So we're also looking at, if you were saying, take this off our hands, take this off our hands, take that off our hands, it means all the money allocated to all of those things will also be taken off your hands, no longer your responsibility. So is INEC really willing to tell the federal government that work is too much for us, take this off our hands, because it means that definitely whatever comes to you will be reduced in terms of budget. But as I keep saying, is that it's all about getting the people to do the work for you. For example, if you can't arrest anybody, of course, INEC is not law enforcement. Yeah. Exactly. But do you actively involve the police? That's where the question is. The moment you sense anything wrong, do you actively inform the police? If you're in your polling unit as INEC officials and you see something wrong, do you quickly inform the police, or do you turn your eyes to the other side? The same thing when it comes to vote buying. You are supposed to be in charge of a polling unit. You are supposed to be in charge of this area. And of course, vote buying is against your electoral law as a commission. If you see vote buying, do you immediately and inform the necessary authorities? Do you tell ICPC, draw this attention, I'm seeing an activity there? Or do you just keep quiet and just let it flow, so that later on it will come to be in your report that certain things happen? I believe the lessons not being learned is the quick response to issues when they arise? Is INEC fast about doing things? Are they quick on doing certain things? I believe that that is also a gap that needs to be filled or covered. When you see something wrong, do you immediately draw the attention of police? Do you immediately turn and draw the attention of the ICPC and all of that? Because you are not expected to do everything. You also have your jurisdiction. You also have what your job description is as INEC and what you're supposed to do. At the same time, you have the disposal of every other organization, parastatal and the government agency as your disposal. I believe is left for INEC to make use of it and all of that. And I'm just hoping that that will be the case, that INEC keeps improving and becoming better, and we are not seeing certain things repeating themselves until they're ready to do or to put in the work that is expected. We might keep seeing some of these lapses, but I want to believe that there would be some improvement. And I just hope, one of the things that I'm hoping is that at the end of the day, we will have reports that are genuine, that people will give report, because over the years in the past election, this repeated itself, where despite we knowing what happened in the polling unit, we have the presidency, because they are now the winning party, coming out to say the report and this organization, that organization wasn't right. I can imagine them being on the opposite side. They would have supported the report. So I just hope in the end, the report that we will have coming in concerning what happened in every polling unit and how INEC conducted this election will not be tampered with, but that people will be honest about it, and then we will accept it regardless of whether I'm on the winning side or the losing side. The aim is for a better Nigeria, and hopefully we will get there.
Well, just like I said, Richard, I'm just hoping with all of this thing, let us see what are the indigenes of the state saying about it.
Yeah.
Already Yega Africa is coming out to tell us what they observed from the election, and I think it's very valid that the INEC look into that issue, bring out a very valid reason, even though I believe Nigerians are getting tired of excuses coming from INEC. If you said you were ready and looking at the number of security agencies that were being deployed to this state, you will be expecting more, you know, something smoother than what we're seeing on the paper. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how this whole thing turns out. Let's quickly round up the Vanguard newspaper, where we have the 2024 budget. How to end Nigeria's economic woes. This is coming from the Senate. You can do well to find detail of that story on page 4. Also, we have wanted killer of Rivers, DPO, 2 Baba men, storm community and kill 5. This is really a sad one. You can find detail of that story on page 6. We have a picture story, Astera Holding, SGM. You can find the detail of that meeting that they have there inside the paper. And that's all on the Vanguard newspaper. But before we continue, Richard, I think we've said one or two, and we'd love to hear from our viewers at home what you have to say about what you observe about the off-season election that took place in Imo, Kogi and Bayelsa. Also, as we await inflation for October tomorrow, and we're seeing speculations that by December, inflation might be 30%, looking at the soar of food prices, goods, and even the fuel. So we'd love to hear what your own take is about any of the story that is of interest when we come back from the break. Please stay tuned with us.
Hello viewers, my name is Amaka Ocheke. We anchor the program, The Living Room, right here on Equa TV International.
You are welcome to watch us every Monday.
The Living Room is a very interesting family program where we discuss everything you want to know about family.
Talk about our children's mental health.
Keep watching. Our program is always here, 5:30 every Monday. We want you to ask questions. We want you to phone in and drop topics that you want us to talk about, even on our media handle on Facebook. We're there. So keep watching, keep listening. The Living Room.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies. We've been looking at a number of stories that are on the front page of some of the papers, especially looking at this election that took place in Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa, where we're saying that Governor Hope Uzodinma has been re-elected in Imo State, Odudu in Kogi State, and as we await that of Bayelsa, even though Dire is leading there, talking about the PDP. And then we're still having the issue of the inflation prices, and there are quite a number of stories on the paper that are quite interesting. So we will love to hear what your own take is. We want to hear your views on any of the story that is of interest to you. Our number is on your screen at this moment. Please do remember, turn down the volume of your TV set and also try to summarize your point in a minute when you call us, and be audible enough so we can hear you clearly, and also viewers at home can get to hear what you have to say about any of the stories on the paper. I still have Rachel Tanzi with me in the studio. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome.
All right, before the calls come in, let's continue with the paper analysis.
On Leadership newspaper, we have NNPC restores oil production of 275,000 barrels per day at Total Energies. We have Gaza war. We have Arab Islamic nations call for peace. You can find details on page 6. And on Confab, Omuka Osoba lead 300 editors to Uyo. You can find details on page 6. Flights diverted as airplane incident closes Abuja runway. More details can be found on page 24. Sokoto, KB, Zamfara low in immunization. A report coming from UNICEF, and I hope that the government of these states do something about it, as we don't want the resurfacing of some viruses and diseases that are long gone in Nigeria to be coming back again. You can find more details on page 20. The big story on the paper, governorship polls, Ododo wins Kogi, Hope returns in Imo. The writer saying SDP, LP, PDP kick seek cancellation of results. We have Diri Silva, no fate today as coalition resumes in Bayelsa. You can find details on page 4. And then we have fact check. What was Apabio's warning to agencies head, I believe, was that they will lose their job if they don't show up to give their report so that the Senate can go on with the 2024 budget. Yes. And then we have trending EFCC arrest 14 for vote buying. You can find details of both stories on page 2, and that's all news on Leadership newspaper.
Let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper. And on the sad note, immigration lose 3 in auto crash on Kano Zaria Road yesterday. Very sad one to the Nigeria and also the immigration. We send our condolences to the family of those people that are affected. I got to know that 2 brothers were involved in that. Very sad indeed for the family. So you can do well to find more detail of that story on page 17 of the Blueprint newspaper. Bandit kills 7, kidnapped many in a fresh Zamfara attack. We hope that security agency will get and swift into action. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. Executive legislature collaboration essential for removal of fiscal policy. This is coming from the Senate. Well, we hope to see a synergy from these bodies, arms of government, to look into the policies of Nigeria. And on oil production by 275,000 barrels per day, and in PCL settle Pengasa Total Management Road. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. And on off-cycle polls amid protest, Uzodinma re-elected Imo Governor, Odudu Kogi Governor-elect. With Dire leads in Bayelsa, PDP, SDP, Labour Party kicking Imo and Kogi State. Is victory well deserved? This is coming from the APC Deputy National Prescribe. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. Court order restore. Okay, I take that story. Court orders reinstatement payment for the NSITF staff salary arrears. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. Inflation may hit 30% by December 2023, says the KPMG. You can find detail of that story in the paper. Tinubu to declare editors annual confirm open today. You can find detail of that story in the paper. And talking about international story on Israeli-Hamas war, Arab Islamic nation condemn military offensive with the writer call for immediate ceasefire. You can find detail of that story on page 6, and that's all on Blueprint newspaper.
On this day, respite seen for Naira as CBN intensifies settlement of FX backlogs. You can start with the details on the front page. KPMG predicts lower GDP growth in the second half despite fuel subsidy and foreign exchange reforms. Omuka Osoba Abebena leads 300 editors to annual conference in Uyo. Coming from NETI, huge recurrent expenditure affecting states' capacity to develop. Loan receipts by Rivers, Akwa Ibom grew 935.27%, 680.91% in 1 year. The big story on the paper, Uzodinma Ododo win Imo Kogi Diri leads in Bayelsa. Opposition candidates call for cancellation of elections. Viega Africa alleges INEC uploaded results for PUs where elections didn't hold. And coming from Huriwa, exercise viciously rigged, full of violence. Advises losers not to waste money challenging results. We can see picture story where we see declared winner in Imo where we can see hope, and then we are also seeing Ododo giving a thumbs up in Kogi State, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Dangote Refinery secure license to refine 300,000 barrel per day crude oil. You can find detail of that story on page 22. And we are having vice chancellors have written to the federal government rejecting 40% varsity IGR deduction. We recall last week we saw that where the federal government is looking into 40% revenue coming in, and here the VCs are saying no because they are not on their own, talking about the fact that the federal government have rejected their autonomy for them to be on their own, stopping them from increasing on, tuition fee and all of that. So here they are rejecting the 40% varsity IGR deduction. You can do well to read more detail of that story on page 8. And then also we are having Kala pace setting military, Amazon takes last salute. You can find detail of that story on page 3. And the big story here says PDP, LP Kigas Ozodima Ududu win, protest in Bayelsa with the rider. Ozodima wins all the local government. Opposition reject Imo and Kogi results, says no election took place. Dire supporters protest as Silva wins Nebi with 22,248 votes. APC defends victory in the local government. You can do well to find more detail of that story inside the paper. And also on the editor summit, NGE draws Tinubu, Ribadu, and others to Oyo. You can find more of that story on page 29. Federal government aims for 1.9 million barrel per day. Intensify war against oil theft. Detail found inside the paper. Nigerians make unfair demand on lawmakers. This is coming from the Senate President. You want to know what those demands are. You can do well to read detail of that on page 7. Here we are seeing artist takes ill during church concert, dies in the hospital. Quite a sad one as well. Detail found on page 4 and 5. And still on the issue of the Israel-Hamas war, Arab nations condemn Gaza killing once ICC probe. We detail of that story found on page 20, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, we have 9M23 Tier 1 banks asset jump 42.98% to 78.87 trillion naira. And on revenue, boost for Nigeria as NNPCL restores 275,000 barrels per day. You can find more details on page 8. The big story on the paper, APC's Uzodinma Ododo win Imo and Kogi. INEC continues Bayelsa collation today. Malawi PDP Labour Party order kicks one election cancelled. Navy recovers arms, deactivate criminals camp in Bayelsa. PSC commends show of courage by police. Arrest sponsors of electoral offenses, Serap tells INEC. You can find details on page 27, page 27 and 26. Coming from Apabio, National Assembly stopped Nigeria from having life president in 2007. Lawyers seek immediate end to media parade of crime suspects. And in Borno, military airstrike killed terrorists in 4 gun trucks. We have NG, Annual, Confab, Amuka, Osoba, and 300 editors to Uyo. You can find details on page 3. And we have results in the column showing INEC declares results. We have in Imo and Kogi State, and you can see the numbers. CNS spiritual father prophet Abidoye passes on at 103. We have the writer saying veteran actor Samanja dies at 81. Passengers stranded as plane gets trapped at Abuja airport. You can find details on page 4. We've learned nothing from the past. Catholic bishop is telling the president, urges Labour to show mercy on Imo masses. And at the downside, we have a study that says CT scans tied to blood cancer in kids. You can find details on page 27 in that old news, or New Telegraph newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at Nature newspaper, where we have Dangote Refinery secure license for daily crude processing. Detail of that story can be found on the front page and on page 3. The big story here says wall away decision on plastic pollution threatening as INC begins meeting in Nairobi. You can find detail of that on page 3. Environment Minister pledges to complete Ogini cleanup. You can find detail on page 5. Abuja scrap market squatters giving 1 week ultimatum to vacate. Detail found on page 5. Or your government shut down illegal mining sites. Detail found also on page 5. And we have fact check, is global warming, okay, I take that. A fact check says, is global warming truly a blessing for Africa? This is a question you can do well to find detail inside the paper. And downside of the paper, we have Rwanda launches mountain bike for aspiring young cyclists. Detail found on page 21. We have other stories on the front page of the paper. You can do well to grab that paper and read more detail of story that is of interest to you.
On Business Day newspaper, Japan, Nigerians living abroad recount struggles. The big story on the paper, NNPC failing to meet equity payment for Dangote refinery. You can find details of the big story on page 30. Rising manufacturing woes, poor calls for policy rejig. You can find details on page 30. And we have African Development Bank secures biggest investment commitment since 2019 for Africa project. Business Day invites fast-growing companies to apply for Africa ranking. You can find details on page 21. And Nigeria's fiscal woes linger. Analysts question zero projection for recoveries in MTEF. You can find details on page 2. And that's all news on Business Day newspaper.
Well, that's also how far we can go. Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with us. Thank you to our viewers and our supporters at home for keeping a date with us on this show. Until we come here again, do have a better day ahead.